Hi, I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Rihanna, and welcome back to Fresh Off the Broke.
Fresh Off the Broke is about personal experiences growing up Asian American in a predominantly white community, Asian media, and Asian pop culture in general. Race has always been a sensitive topic. Every day there are debates over race. With our podcast, we intend to shed light on the experiences of first-generation Asian immigrants, not put them on a pedestal.
We understand that race isn't everything, but there should be an acknowledgement of people of color, the knowledge gap, and the racial divide that will ideally be broken. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the episode. Today's topic is the Hafu experience, and we're joined by special guest Nina Cataldo, the founder of Hafu Ladies, to talk about it.
Yay!
Hi everybody, my name is Nina Cataldo, and I am based in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm Japanese and American, what we call Hafu in Japanese. And I am the founder of Hafu Ladies, which is a community for mixed race Japanese women all over the world.
So how did Hafu Ladies come to be?
So Hafu Ladies started nearly 3 years ago. And it was a few years after I moved back to Japan, first time as an adult. And I was really struggling with finding a community where I felt like I fit in as a mixed race Japanese person, which is not so common in Japan itself. And I stumbled upon a community for Hafu people, for mixed race Japanese people. And it was a great community, mixed gender, everybody was welcome in it. But I saw that there was no space created for just women. And as the intersection of being a woman and also mixed race, I think there were a lot of topics that I personally felt like I would feel comfortable talking in just a space for women. So out of that need, I just decided to create it. I talked with a few of my Hafu friends, Hafu women friends, and they were on board with it. So it started with just a small community of about 6 or 7 girls, women in a Facebook group, and it has now grown to over 1,000 members worldwide.
So where exactly does Hafu Ladies take place? Like, is it a social media group? Is it like a Facebook group? Could you clarify that for our audience?
Yes, absolutely. So it is a Facebook group, and I'm still working on trying to move it off of Facebook so that it's more accessible by people who also don't have social media. But so far, it has been a private Facebook group. And also we have an Instagram that people can follow as well.
And we'll be sure to link that in the description for anyone interested.
Yeah. So do you have any goals/hopes with your work?
Yeah, so Hafu Ladies runs on our 3 pillars, which is to educate, empower, and to embrace our identities. And so with the group, my goal is for each of us members to be able to educate ourselves and each other about issues that concern our identity, ourselves as women, as Hafus, and to also feel empowered through that connection. Because a lot of times, especially being in Japan, society kind of can get us down about our identity and not allow us to fit into Japanese society per se. And to also, with that, to be able to embrace our identities and whoever we are as well. And through the pandemic, it was a really great opportunity for us to expand more globally, because before all of that happened, I was doing social events in Tokyo every other month or so. And I felt very immobile. I couldn't go overseas. I couldn't go to other cities as much to host events.
Definitely.
But yeah, and with the pandemic, we just started doing all these Zoom events, and that really, I think, helped our community grow stronger together and for it to be expanded more globally as well. So what I hope to continue doing is those types of events. And I'm also just about to launch a mentorship program for young Hafu girls as well. Yeah, so I'm hoping that could expand into helping young adults also, and anyone in the community to be able to find a way to mentor one another and to work with each other in that sort of setting.
That sounds great. I mean, when we were looking up people, from the Hafu community on Instagram or just on social media in general, when I look up, for example, Hafu or half Japanese on Instagram, there aren't many, if any at all, existing accounts like yours. And I mean, when I looked up half Japanese, there were some weird things that came up that I'm not gonna elaborate on, but you know, there were
Right.
some very odd things that came up, very interesting. So
Right.
I'm really glad that there's a community like yours that exists, because since it's also online, that means that way more people can join, since you know they could
Yeah.
join your like Zoom call and they can text people across the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's so great. Like some of my best friends have come out of being in this community, and some of us have never actually met in real life, but you know, we talk online
Wow.
and we see each other's faces on Zoom calls. So it really makes me feel like there's this global sisterhood that we can really lean on and be in this together.
I love that. That's so cute.
That's really cute.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear things like good things that have come out of this pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. It really was a silver lining for our community. It really did open my eyes. You know, it came at a really perfect time, not the pandemic itself, but in a time when I was thinking about how can I make this much more accessible than just a Facebook community? How can I make events more global? And I was thinking of implementing leadership cohort across the board in the main cities where we had members and things like that. And while I was setting that up, the world shut down, and then we're like, well, we can just host events online. So in that sense, it did come at a time when I think people especially needed to make connections and you know, stay together. And this became one of those communities where people could do that and lean on each other.
And with the pandemic, there's a lot of little online communities that people have made. And, you know, since with the pandemic, a lot of people have been feeling extra lonely since they couldn't go out. Having communities online helps them recreate or just have a similar connection to people that they couldn't get in person anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And we have it's slowed down a little bit in terms of events because the world is opening up a bit and people are busier again. But we had such an array of events, like from weekly yoga sessions to journaling to hosting more like academic based events, talking about the connection between our racial identity and language ability, and talking about how Asian women are portrayed during the pandemic. There's so many types of topics that we were able to cover and continue to expand on.
Right. So going off of what you just said about racial identity, how has Hafu Ladies changed your relationship with your racial identity, or like how did you start off before you had Hafu Ladies?
Yeah, so growing up, and this is still pretty relevant, a lot of parents are more hesitant on calling their children Hafu. And a lot of Hafus themselves can be hesitant about using that term because it did start off as a derogatory term post-war.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the word Hafu comes from half, you know, meaning half something. So it kind of portrays someone as not whole as something.
So like not pure blood or not something like that.
Exactly. And so growing up, it wasn't a term that was used in my household either. And I had a really kind of an uneasy relationship with that term. I didn't like using it myself even as I grew up. And then when I came back to Japan, and I was just so struggling to understand who I was, because for me, I was coming back to my home country where I was born. I was coming back to Japan, and yet the society wasn't accepting me as a Japanese person. And during that time, I came across another person's project who proudly used the term Hafu. It was a photography project by Tetsuro Miyazaki, and meeting him and finding out that there was a whole community based around taking pride in this word and how that has connected each person, that allowed me to feel more comfortable and accept who I was in a really confident way and an empowering way even. So yeah, before I created Hafu Ladies, before I came across any Hafu communities, I was really struggling to figure out where I fit in. And I think after creating Hafu Ladies, I feel like I have a place that I belong. And a lot of the community members themselves have told me that it has helped them find a place where they belong and feel safe as well. So that is a really wonderful to hear.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and also you created this community, so it's almost like it's your little cozy circle of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you don't see a community that you want, it's just important to create it yourself, I think. And yeah, I do it out of love. I do it out of thinking about what would I have wanted at any stage of my life, any age of my life, and what can I offer to others that I would have wanted others to create for myself as well.
Yeah. It might be cheesy, but it kind of reminds me of that quote or that saying, be the change you wish to see in the world.
That's so true. I haven't thought about that quote in a long time, but that is really relevant.
Because I mean, you said that you hadn't seen very many Hafu communities, so you made one on your own. So in that sense, you made a community as well as started a little positive wave.
Yeah, definitely. And even in the community, there's so much diversity, which is so great. And sometimes that can also cause like heavy discussions to happen, which can, you know, go in any way, positive or negative. So sometimes it can get difficult trying to moderate that and make sure that everyone still continues to feel safe. And I'm still learning as I go as well. It's a ongoing learning process. I know that I have my own flaws and I have to check my privilege as well sometimes. So that has been eye-opening, and sometimes a reason that I cry, but also the reason that I continue doing this.
So going along what you just said about heavy discussions, are there ever butting of heads between Hafus from different countries or of different ethnicities?
Yeah, I think the biggest butting of heads is generational difference and definitely racial differences, from especially when Black Lives Matter was happening, and it's still relevant. Obviously, it's still going on. There were a lot of people from different viewpoints on the matter, and for example, when that happened, I had to tighten the rules around our community to protect our Black sisters and community members. And at the same time, there's a lot of just generational misunderstanding. And this is, you know, this happens in my household with my parents as well. They're in their 60s and 70s, and it's hard for them to understand what quote unquote millennials are talking about and things like that. And similar things can happen in the Hafu community as well, because we have people who are 80 years old, 60 years old, as well as people who are 19 and 20 in their 20s and 30s. So it really depends on who it is. Some are willing to have a discussion and talk about it and learn from one another, and for some people it's just really hard to wrap their heads around some concepts and discussions. And so trying to moderate that and trying to empathize and understand people's different backgrounds and upbringings, that has been a challenge in itself. It's something that I'm continuing to learn again, because I'm a person in their 20s as a millennial, and you know, I take in what I know as well.
That's a really impressive age diversity that you have.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I just
That's
you
crazy.
have people in your 80s and also people that are 19, 18. That's a really impressive age diversity.
It really is.
That you have all these different types of people in your
I think the most active members tend to be people in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, we do have people of all ages. And when we host events online, we'll have people of that are totally different ages come on. So it's really great to be able to connect with them on that level, regardless of age, regardless of location, regardless of racial makeup of our mixed race backgrounds. Yeah, that's really great.
Mhm. So you said that you've lived in Japan as well as in the West, right?
Yes, in the US.
Mm-hmm. So have you ever noticed a difference in treatment of hafus in Japan compared to when you were in the US?
Yeah, in the US, the term Hafu doesn't exist. And I grew up not really thinking of myself any different from any other kid in my class, you know. As a, I knew that I was Asian, I knew that I was white, but it was never something that made me feel like I stuck out so much. Most kids just accepted me for a friend and as a classmate, and it really wasn't a topic that ever came up growing up. It's really funny because even when I took courses around Asian American identity in college, it's interesting because I didn't actually find myself, I didn't think I was connected to that experience. And it's only now, looking back on it nearly 10 years later, that I realize how relevant that is actually to my life. I guess what I'm trying to say is that racial identity wasn't something that I had to confront so much in the United States, where people are of such different mixtures and such different backgrounds. And it was just when I came back to Japan that I realized that I am treated differently and I'm looked at differently than the other Japanese people around me.
That's interesting because I'm surprised. Well, not surprised, but I'm glad to hear that like growing up, that wasn't really an issue for you. Like people just saw you as you were. Like that's really good to hear. But at the same time, like it's a good thing that you also realized how much this actually affects you in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I did have, like the very common bento story, when we first moved to the US when I was 8, taking a very Japanese lunch to school and kids not understanding what it was, or the classic, those kinds of little experiences I definitely did experience. But I think once I got to about high school, college, it's almost like I just saw myself as a white girl, or I saw myself just blended in. I was comfortable with the friends I had. They saw me for who I was, and it wasn't so much about race. And it's interesting to go back now when I visit, because again, when I'm in Japan, it's something that I literally have to face every day, like microaggressions, as someone who natively speaks Japanese, but still get asked every day that my Japanese is good, that can I use chopsticks, all this kinds of stuff. And those things I don't have to endure when I go back to the States. And it was almost kind of a shock. I just went back last month to visit my family in Oregon, and I hadn't been home in 3 years to the States. And it was almost a shock to the system. Like, why aren't people talking about racial stuff? Why, in terms of like the Asian American experience or the Hafu experience? Because in Japan, I literally have to talk about it every day or confront it every day. So it was kind of like this little vacation from the identity crisis or identity reflection that I have to go through.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So since you have these two very contrasting experiences, have you ever felt that you had to present yourself a certain way or act a certain way when you were in Japan or when you were in the US as compared to the other?
Yeah, in Japan, well, since my formative years were really in the United States, I do feel like a lot of my mannerism and a lot of my ways of thinking are more closely tied to Western ways of thought. In that
Mhm.
sense, I do feel more comfortable when I'm in the United States, and I can kind of act a bit more like myself, however that means.
Mhm.
But in Japan, it's this constant battle of trying to prove that I'm Japanese enough to be here.
Mm.
And for that matter, it's like I bow more than others, or I try to be more respectful and understanding of Japanese culture, and mannerisms, and I try to follow them, and sometimes like having to like overcompensate for that, just for
Mhm.
them, just for Japanese society to see me as even a tiny bit Japanese,
Mm.
or at least a foreigner who understands Japanese culture per se.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that is because
Mhm,
even for myself, I'm fully Chinese. When
mhm,
I go back to China, I get weird comments. I remember one time I thought I was wearing what was considered a very normal outfit, and I
mm.
stand by that. It was a very normal outfit. But then someone in my family, they made the comment that I don't look Chinese. Like if
Mm,
someone saw me right now, they would know immediately that
right.
might be a Chinese American, or I'm just not a native Chinese person, or whatever that means.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. I think people tend to pick up on that, but it's like how true can we stay, how true can we stay to ourselves and not have to succumb to having to, I don't know, blend into society more. It's funny because I have blonde hair, and that's just a fashion thing for me. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to my dark brown roots for a while, and I missed the summer blonde, so I dyed it back to blonde just because it's fun. But it's not like that's
As
me
you
trying
should.
to, yeah, and it's not like me trying to be more Western or white. It's not me trying to stand out in Japan, and I still try to blend in to Japanese society, and yet it's like, why do I dye my hair blonde? It's a funny contrast, I think. But it's like I want to stay true to myself. I want to still be fashionable in the way I want to be. I want to be, whatever I feel like I want to do, and
Of
yet
course.
I want people to be able to accept me for who I am, and also accept the fact that I am Japanese as much as I am American.
Mm. Going off the picking a side thing, do you think there are any privileges when it comes to being white passing? Like any.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, and it is something that makes me feel uncomfortable,
Mm.
a lot of times, but especially in Japanese media, Hafus are most often, um, half white, models and people like that.
Uh,
And so there's this stereotypical image of what a Hafu person looks like, what they're like, in Japanese society, and in terms of being half white, that's what people see me. Oh, like you're like the type of Hafu that I always imagine, kind of thing.
oh.
And there that I know for a fact that Hafus who are half black endure so much more racism than someone like me does.
Mhm.
And then other Hafus who are half Asian, also Asian in terms of like, Chinese Hafu, Korean Hafu, they endure a different type of racism than white Hafus as well.
Mm.
So while there
Right.
are so many similarities in terms of the experiences we all have as mixed race Japanese people, there are definitely, things that some other racial Hafus endure that I can't, speak to their experience, but have heard from friends and have experienced seeing them go through as well. And yeah, so this stereotypical Hafu thing is something I try to debunk a lot of times when I hold, workshops and,
Definitely.
lectures. Yeah, I did one that I think that was the most, um, memorable, was when I held, a lecture on. I was on a boat for a while, and I held a lecture about the realities of what what the Hafu experience in Japan is like. And I told people, it was a whole all Japanese audience, and told people about the realities of what we go through, but also how they, as in Japanese people, treat white passing or white Hafus differently from others, and kind of really honing at that. And people just came back to me saying that they had no idea. They thought that Hafu people just all had it great with like rainbows and butterflies, and that their lives are so much better because they had a little mixture of a race in them, essentially. And it's not like that at all.
Definitely not. And I mean, isn't it so odd how people get caught up in the visual aesthetics of everything?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't matter, but then like for some reason it seems to matter so much that someone looks a certain way or doesn't look a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy to see, like, a lot of times there was about, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, and I think this trend might be coming back again, is a lot of like the fashion magazines in Japan would have makeup sections that were like makeup that makes you look more Hafu. And
Interesting.
also, yeah, and it's in reality it's just like, no, it's just makeup to make you look a bit more Western, and more specifically white Western. And and also I hear so often people saying, oh, I wish like I had a Hafu child, and it's for aesthetic reasons. It's for, and they mean a child with a white person. It's like I really do try to, when the situation feels safe enough to be open about it, I really try to question that sort of way of thinking, and try to just have a discussion with people who make comments like that, because at the bottom of it is like, oh, you're saying you want a Hafu child, but you mean a white half child, and that's a totally different thing. And it's because of the way they see Hafu children or Hafu people, and so many times they follow it up with, I want a Hafu child because they're so cute. And it just makes me shake my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of those very uncomfortable Pinterest boards that people make, or basically mood boards, or whatever aesthetically pleasing thing of mixed race babies. It's very very unsettling to see.
Yeah, it's one thing to celebrate diversity, and to celebrate people who come from mixed race backgrounds and things, but it is another to kind of fantasize about it or exoticize that.
Yeah, definitely.
It turns the kids into little toys, or just some weird aesthetic being.
Yeah,
just like an accessory.
Exactly. Yeah.
So speaking on the whole Hafus in the media, or lack thereof, do you, or have you ever had like a role model or someone that you looked up to in the media?
Yeah, especially nowadays, I think there are so many more Hafu role models. Growing up, actually, quite a few children's channels in Japan would have kids of mixed race backgrounds, but they were all white mixed race, white Hafus, like we were just talking about. And yet, when I saw them, I did see myself in that, which made me feel kind of excited to see that that there is a place on Japanese TV and media. But now I think people are lucky. There are so many more Hafus and outspoken Hafus, and Naomi Osaka is a fantastic example.
Oh my god, yeah, she's crazy.
Yeah, and she's so outspoken about so many social issues, and I think that's so important. And at the same time, she just lost in the Olympics a few days ago, and suddenly, even though she was the one who lit the torch at the end of the opening ceremony, but then because she lost her last round in tennis, suddenly she's under fire again of Japanese people rejecting her as being Japanese. And it's really difficult to see that that Japan will only accept mixed race Japanese people if they're winning something for them. Another role model for me is Ariana Miyamoto, and I do hope to really be able to meet her one day. She was Miss Universe Japan a few years ago. Yeah, she's half American, African American, half Japanese, and she's so just well spoken.
Oh, I think
she's
I
not.
heard about her.
Yeah, and she was under a lot of fire as well when she won, and I think it's because she won over other Japanese women who could have had that position. So Japan was kind of mad about that sort of thing. But even through all of that, she still continued to be really well spoken and poised, and I really admire that as well.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said about Naomi Osaka, it's so annoying to see when people get so critical, because I mean, it's the same people that are sitting on their couch watching the Olympics, and then they have so much to say.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's always them just complaining about, you know, Naomi Osaka or Ariana. And the thing is, they're not. What are they doing?
No.
What are they out there doing with their lives other than complaining about the fact that they're winning?
Yeah, it is. People just like to have opinions, and I think Japan is especially one of the many, but one of the very strong countries that this idea of pure Japanese is so strong. It's such a homogenous country, and so many people I've talked to, they're just Japanese people. They have no interest in finding out about their family roots. And it's so different compared to in the US, where everyone is quite mixed, or it's a quite immigrant nation. People are so curious to find out what their roots are.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting contrast to be a part of both of those cultures.
Do you have any advice for any Hafus out there?
Yeah, I think each person, whether you're Hafu or not, you are a special individual, and whatever your relationship to your identity is, I think it's so important to take pride in that, and it's for you to define for yourself. There's no one way or the other to live a life as a Hafu. You don't even have to use that term. You can define yourself as whoever you are, but I think the most important is like to believe in yourself and to take pride in that, because people will question you, especially for mixed race people. People question us when we say we're from here or there, or we're a mixture of this. But if you say it confidently, if you believe in yourself, then people have no other choice but to believe you, or at least to respect and leave you alone. So it's a lifelong journey. Identity is something that I think I know for myself is a continuous journey where I have a different relationship with every day, every year, every decade. But just enjoy the ride and continue to define yourself however you want as you continue to grow.
Thank you for the very wise words, and thank you for joining us on our podcast. That was a great note to end it on. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I guess that's it.
Bye.
As always, feel free to leave a comment about your experiences, any surprising facts that you might have learned today. You can share a role model you may have. Do you look up to Naomi Osaka? Why aren't you looking up to Naomi Osaka? And feel free to leave a nice comment about Nina. I mean, if you're interested in joining Hafu Ladies, like we said, all the links will be in the description, and feel free to check them out.
If you guys like this episode and want to stay connected with us, check out our website in the description. It contains links to our streaming platforms such as Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and more. Follow us for more behind-the-scenes content, announcements, and other random things we decide to put on there.
See you next time. Bye.